Wait, what are we doing again?
I don't remember. What are we supposed to be doing? Oh yeah, this is Pitch Feedback Live. I forgot.
I thought this was a general community meeting.
It's been a while. And in fact, this is our last one of the year, which is kind of sad, kind of bittersweet. But you know what? We're going to have so many good ones next year as well. Very excited for that. So welcome everyone to another edition of Pitch Feedback Live. My name is Maddie Mindling, and joining me today is the always insightful and delightful man of the hour, director of production, Stephen Iwanyk. Welcome.
I'm insightful.
You're very insightful.
You're
always picking up on really interesting nuances of our pitches, and you have lots and lots of experience. So it's always so wonderful to have you and to just be able to co-host this show with you. Stephen is in a flight path, so you may hear occasional
You picked up on that?
Yeah.
My windows are closed. It's ridiculous.
I think I shook my computer a little bit. So yes, welcome. Stephen will be helping me to review real pitches from our community. You have many years of experience reviewing pitches, both within the Tongal platform and outside. I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, so I've been at Tongal for 5 years, and I know you shared a statistic, like, I don't know, a few episodes of this before we call these episodes, of like the many thousands of pitches I've seen just at Tongal, which is insane to me that there have been so many thousands. But before this, I used to represent TV writers and directors. And so it was about looking at people pitching themselves to me to sign as clients, actually pitching them myself to networks and studios and producers and whatnot, and helping them put together pitches for networks and studios and whatnot. And so much of my life has revolved around pitching in some way, shape, or form.
That's awesome. And we get the benefit of gleaning all of your just years of experience and, I think just looking through so many different types of projects on Tongal, you've kind of seen it all, I guess.
So much flattery here. You can ask me for something later on.
Yes, maybe. So yes, thank you for lending us your expertise. We have a lot of good stuff in store for you guys today. We'll be reviewing a pitch for TrueView, which I think will be kind of interesting just because we've been doing a lot more YouTube TrueView ads on the platform. You probably have seen those on the open projects page. And we're also going to be reviewing a podcast pitch. We had so many people reach out to us after the iHeartMedia Next Great Podcast project. So we wanted to finally do a podcast pitch. We have a great one in store for you. So if you're tuning in, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the forums. Let us know where you're tuning in from. And if you'd like one of your pitches to be reviewed by us on a future Pitch Feedback Live, let us know by emailing us at info@tongal.com. And we'll be happy to consider. So I guess I'd like to start out with, in your opinion, Stephen, what are some of the key elements that make for a great pitch?
I love clarity of vision. If that sounds maybe really academic as a way to describe it, but a lot of pitches that I see sort of restate the brief back at me, which isn't really necessary. I mean, like, we all know what we're talking about. So when I come into a pitch and the first 3 pages are just like copying and pasting things from the brief, it's nice that you read the brief, but I don't necessarily need that. But oftentimes I see that, and then I see someone talk a lot about themselves, and they're very generalized. And essentially what they're doing is they're kind of relying on their past work. Like, I've done cool things and I can restate the brief back at you, so I'm going to do cool things for you. And that doesn't give me a lot of clarity in terms of like what you're actually trying to execute. And you'd be surprised just how frequently you see that, even with much more experienced filmmakers and animators. And look, in some cases, your past work is so exceptional and it's so perfect for this project that you'll still win out. But since this is kind of about like the statistics, right? Trying to increase your chances of success, you definitely want to make sure that what you're trying to accomplish is clear and that there's an actual vision for what you're trying to accomplish. It's not just like, I can do what you're asking. It's, I'm going to do this to address what you're asking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do think there is an element of just being able to, yes, show that you read the brief, show that you understand the ask, but also show what you have to bring to the table that's going to be unique and that's going to stand out from all the other pitches that are also regurgitating the language in the brief. I think, we always want our creators to, to think a little bit outside the box a bit. I think that's really important, and the best way to really differentiate yourself is through the creative and how you approach the ask in the brief.
And it's tough to take a strong point of view, because that's essentially what you're asking in a lot of cases, right? Because a lot of people may not come in with a strong point of view because they want to play it safe. They don't want to take a position and miss out because they've taken a strong position. But more often than not, it's the people who take a strong position, who do something really different, who are like, I see what you're asking, and I'm going to bring you a Wes Anderson style, quirky, weird, colorful, pastel-hued spot. Because then the brand's going to be like, well, that's different. That's really cool. We should talk about this thing, right? It stands out.
Planted that seed, and now you've changed the conversation just a little bit.
Been trying to do things like that for a while.
Yeah.
But the other thing too, and I know I talk about this a lot, is like talking about the potential and the possibilities and how your idea can flex, right? You never want to say, this is exactly what I'm going to do. It's, this is what I want to do and why I think it works. And this is how we could change things, right? And in the conversations I always have with brands, I'm always trying to make sure that they're not taking a pitch and looking at it literally. Like, oh, well, they want to do this, and we need to say this phrase of copy, and it's not in their pitch, right? But if you're taking a stronger perspective, you're coming in with a bigger idea, you want to still be able to showcase as you present it that you can flex and that you can shift, and like, no, it doesn't have to be exactly Wes Anderson. It's still gonna work if it's not all pastel colors.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, especially with like the TrueView stuff, it's very call to action oriented. You do have that, like, you need to hit on this specific, line of copy. But it's how you ladder up to that, I think, and how you actually, work your way into getting people to take that specific action. That's where you can have a lot of flexibility. But I think showing that you can, incorporate that in some way, or you are flexible. And we've talked about this before, I think, in past live streams about, just maybe putting some options within your brief. Here's option A, here's option B. Tell us what you like the best. That does tend to work, I think, with brands who don't just want to, who may not be totally sold an idea. And there's something very beautiful about Tongal and the fact that you can pitch up to 5 pitches per project. So, you can take that risk. You can create a pitch that, is like your dream pitch, your version of it. And then you could be a little safer and calibrate that, So I think that is something that people don't take advantage of enough on the platform. And it is a lot of work to put together a pitch. So, either, I think my recommendation has always been maybe add a couple different options, show you're flexible within one pitch, and really buy into that idea, or, have like 2 separate ideas or 3 separate ideas.
Yeah. The other thing that's really nice about options that people don't often think about is that options sort of showcase that you can think about the ask in different ways. We greenlit a pitch for a Venmo project recently, and the filmmaker included, I think, like 5 separate little scripts for different characters, different videos that could be part of the project. And I think, 2 or 3 of them, paraphrasing, I don't remember exactly, but like, were misses, right? Mm-hmm. But they were really clever. And the 2 that worked in combination with the other ones that were really clever, we were like, they know how to think about it. They're very versatile in how they can think about it. And even if these are a miss, we know they can hit it, and we know they're really capable. So whatever we throw at them, however we pivot this, these guys are going to be able to take it and run with it. And that was really impressive.
That's super interesting to kind of see that holistic evaluation process, benefit the creators. I think I hear another airplane.
Now I'm really cautious.
That's okay. It's not your fault. So as we get into the pitches that we're going to take a look at today, I just want to say, thank you to the creators who have volunteered their work. We know it's not easy to have your work peer reviewed and evaluated in front of others, but this is really meant to be a collective learning experience. And, we will do our best to be very constructive and helpful. And we hope that everyone can take something away here that they can apply to their next pitch. We've had some success stories where last time someone had had watched this, they applied the feedback to their pitch, they got the green light. So we really feel like this is kind of your I like to call all of our like Tongal 101 stuff, like that's sort of like your freshman year. I think this is like your senior thesis. This is really we're looking at awesome pitches. These are all great pitches. They've the reason why we selected them was because we think they're great examples, but we do have to be a little nitpicky and try to get into those like more, I think, significant details that you may not realize what producers are thinking about. And we really want to give you a window into what's going on in Steven's head when he's looking at a pitch. So yes, thank you for that. And I think this is really just an opportunity to ask us questions. If you have a question for Steven, feel free to leave it in the project forum. It seems like we do have one question from Freestyle Production. I think we can address now, Steven. I don't know if you see this, but
Sure.
How much do you want to hear about the team on a pitch?
I think generally what I say is any team information makes the most sense at the back end. And really what I kind of want to know out of the team information is like what's relevant to the project. Oftentimes, you'll get like, here's the sound mixer and, here's, this guy and this guy and this guy and our post-production assistant. Those things are cool, but they're not necessarily super relevant. They don't necessarily impact the creative as well. It never hurts to include more information, especially if it's the back end of a deck, because then, and I'm just feeling super practical, right? If the client's really bored as they get down to like page 22 and they skip over some of the team information, you're fine, right? If they dug the creative, that's all that matters. It's helpful to know who you are and what you bring to the table. And one thing that I think is really nice is how your experience and the past work that you've done applies to this project. So if you're, a director who's worked on a lot of, projects where you're working with multiple different shoots over multiple different days to create some sort of anthem video where you're editing 8 different, things into one video, that's super nice. I'll probably see that the past work, right? But being able to hear your perspective on it and how you're bringing that to this project is really nice.
Yeah.
So vague answer. I lean towards less rather than more. But just whatever it is that you're including, make sure that it feels really relevant.
I think that's a good piece of advice. And before we get into our first piece, I just want to kind of circle back to what's been going on. We've been in this pandemic, since March. We've all been work from home, and we've all had to kind of make all these different adjustments. And I just wanted to kind of get, any anecdotes from you, things that you've seen from our community in overcoming these challenges, and projects that you've worked on that you've seen other producers work on, and how has that been going?
It's hard. It's really hard for everyone in every way, in so many different ways. I think it's a good time to think about how limitations can force creativity and allow you to do still really creative things. I know this is like part of a tangent, but like my favorite film genre was film noir. And part of the reason why I've always liked film noir is because in the 40s, with the film code coming out of the war, you couldn't show violence, you couldn't show sex, but you're trying to tell these dark, deeply human, edgy stories that reflect so many of the horrors, right, and the reality that people experienced in the war. So how do you tell a story that's, very violent, that has a lot of sex in it, if the film code means that you can't do any of that? And filmmakers found ways to be really creative. All of a sudden, it's the shadows cast, at a crazy angle on the brick wall, and you don't see someone directly shot, but you see the shadow collapse because of the crazy light on the brick wall. It forced filmmakers to be really creative. And obviously, like, you always think about independent films and independent production, but like right now, there are lots of creative constraints, and you can still do really cool stuff within creative constraints. Some of the solutions are a little bit more like obvious and logistical. For our big PayPal campaign recently, we had a sort of campaign director who filmed the hero spot, but then also did scripts and storyboards for a bunch of other filmmakers in different countries around the world. They had one-day shoots in Mumbai and Dublin and Amsterdam and whatnot. And then they sent all of their raw footage back to the campaign director, so the campaign director could do a huge suite of content, but not have to worry about doing it all in her city over multiple days with a lot of people and a lot of moving parts, because that's high risk. If all of a sudden she's exposed or the talent's exposed or something like that, it could shut the entire production down. Obviously, on most projects that you pitch on, it's going to be difficult for you to do that yourself, but it's still possible if you think about your filmmaking network, right? If the budget is large enough to come in with like, I need this shot, I'm going to do an anthem video with a whole bunch of different people. So I'm going to have my buddy over here get this shot for me. I'm going to have my buddy over here get this shot for me. I'm going to have someone over here record this for me. Do it all separately and weave it all together in a creative way. And you can get around some of the limitations with COVID.
Yeah. I think this pandemic has really tested the power of our community and what they're really capable of.
Yeah. And then, I mean, there are things like, doing another video right now where someone wanted to show passage of time from like the mid 19th century to like present day. Originally, they were thinking that they were going to shoot someone against a whole bunch of different locations with a whole bunch of different costumes and wardrobe, which, be easy single shots of this person over multiple different decades. But it was hard to do multiple locations, hard to do, so much hair, makeup, and wardrobe on someone. And so they're just shooting them sort of like a Willy Wonka-esque, like if you remember the Tunnel of Terror, where Gene Wilder is just there with the colors going crazy, and you have this like crazy psychedelic sequence. And so now for the passage of time thing, we're just going to have the actor standing against a white cyc with crazy lights flashing at him to showcase passage of time in sort of like a science fiction way. And like, it's a totally different way of thinking about things, but it's a creative way of thinking about things.
It is. Yeah. It's very resourceful. It kind of reminds me of like, the theater in a way, using things that are kind of more symbolic as opposed to, really trying to hit things right on the nose. And we're kind of forced to really think about the analog of things, and not just, not just rely heavily on technology, or heavily on location and production value. So it's been a very interesting time.
Yeah. Anyway, I think
you
were
go ahead and
driving
pull
at
up our first.
Yeah, I think you were driving at. Go look at the COVID guidelines.
First, I want to just reiterate some resources that we have on our platform. We did put together this guide for navigating COVID-19 for your production. Highly recommend taking a look at that. I'm sure one of our moderators can put the link in our chat, but it is on our blog. Just go ahead and search for it. And also, as I mentioned, we are doing a number of TrueView projects. So always great to check out our social video best practices. We do have a specific one sheet that's all about TrueView and how to really optimize that format and be creative within that format. So the first pitch we're looking at is from Matthew Crescenza. It's for the ad quadrant brief that we had on our site recently, and something that we like to do in this show or this series is take a look at the brief first, because it really helps us. It puts us in the mindset of the filmmaker, how they're kind of approaching it, and it makes sure that we can check those boxes, as we're looking at the brief, and it gives us something to kind of to reflect back on. So I think a couple of call outs for this particular brief, we'll just go ahead and take a look at the synopsis here. So really it's just creating a 30-second video for YouTube. It's a TrueView format. So with that, we know TrueView is very much like a direct response. You're really trying to get people to take a specific action at the end of that video, whether it's to sign up, to purchase now, to download an app. It focused on one specific action. What's interesting about this project, Stephen, is that it uses all existing footage, and B-roll. So all of that stuff has already been kind of laid out for you. It's really about how you interpret it and what you do with those assets. And so I wonder if you can just kind of speak to that particular challenge as a filmmaker.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, this becomes sort of an editing video, but because you're trying to incorporate a lot of original messaging, and because you're trying to still make this a brand video, although you're using footage from multiple different shoots that kind of say different things, what you're really trying to figure out here is how to edit this all together in a really interesting way, but also to overlay some sort of animation or motion graphic element that makes it feel coherent and connected, that heavily brands it as ad quadrant, and that this, I think, left open the possibility that maybe you could do some live action in addition to this or something. Not really sure how, but it also allows you to kind of think about, like, how can I incorporate some stock footage of little things, different ways of making this footage work really hard for us instead of just kind of weaving it all together, because the footage is fine, right? It's basically just customers talking to camera. And you really want to elevate that with the
especially what you want, that 5-second hook too for YouTube. You want people to be able to. Is TrueView skippable? I imagine it is.
Yeah, and you mentioned before direct response. TrueView for action, right, is what Google and YouTube call it. And that's the key thing, right? Is most of the videos that you generally produce when you're thinking about commercial production are usually more what they call kind of like top of the funnel, which is like brand plays, like, this is our brand and we're cool and this is kind of what we do. TrueView for action, they want someone to watch this and click and take action, right? And with direct response videos and TrueView for action videos, you really need to hit the branding hard and you really need to hit the messaging hard, because because if the video is not going to work for someone, then who cares, right? But by including that messaging and prompting them to take action, if it's relevant to them, they know all the information they need and they're going to click and they're going to take action.
Right. It's really about it's very much about speaking to the right audience, using all the tools you have available to do that. I think especially, it's kind of an extra challenge here to have to use a certain set of assets, but it's what you do with those assets. So I think it's really about leaning into transitions. It calls it out in the brief, snappy transitions, on-screen text, music, sound design, all that to get people hooked in. And then I guess in terms of, let's see, executional mandatories, we always like to look at this section because I feel like executional mandatories is such an intimidating turn of phrase. Do you want to just kind of talk about sort of what it means exactly and why it's important?
Yeah, I mean, really the executional mandatories is just like the things you must have. I'd always go in there and kind of see like how that frames my creative ask. I have to use the brand's color palette. All right, that's pretty straightforward. I can do that, right? That's basically just a superficial thing. I have to end on a strong call to action. That's pretty easy to do, but I kind of have to earn that call to action. So my messaging leading up to that kind of needs to be very coherent. And then the last one is, ad quadrant logo. I think obviously we're going to throw some ad quadrant logo in there.
Yeah. All right, let's go ahead and dive into past work for Matthew. Go ahead and play this from Vimeo. So we already see some very fast cutting, good use of on-screen text. I say this is a pretty relevant piece of work.
Yeah, I Matthew, your team, your past work is sick. I love it. I love the editing style. I love the graphics. I was so excited about this pitch. There's a lot to like here, and assuming that video played smoothly for people, I never know, right?
Probably not.
Essentially, it's lots of rapid cuts. Marissa says the video plays poorly over stream.
Okay.
Well,
we'll just describe the videos for you.
Yeah, it's a lot of footage because this is sort of a brand play for an agency, so it's very relevant as past work. What we're seeing here is a lot of footage from a lot of different videos stitched together in a way where the cuts are synchronized to the music, which is great. The pacing is nice and fast paced. There's so much energy to it, sort of carrying you forward. It feels like upbeat and peppy, and almost all of the shots that are incorporated too have lots of movement. So it's not just that we're cutting to the music, it's that everything about this is moving, and it's so well edited. I love this. But the one thing I saw that I was maybe a little hesitant about as I dove in is that it still felt sort of like a top of funnel brand play. It was kind of like this is some of the cool stuff that we've done. We're cool, use us. But the messaging wasn't as hard. Even the messaging that's included didn't come through as strongly as I think I was expecting Ad Quadrant to want. But again, this is just one piece of past work, so we haven't looked at their treatment yet. We'll see what they put together.
Yeah, I think there are other pieces of past work I will say do show some use of stock footage, which was pretty much right on brief. But it's pretty similar to what we already saw. So we'll go ahead and dive right into the brief here. I will say I love the minimalism of this pitch. So this is kind of getting back to Freestyle's question of, so Matt didn't include a bio. He just includes one slide here that says, "I'm Matt Crescenzo," which I kind of love. It is interesting to just, let my work speak for itself. You don't need to know who I am. But I personally do like a little bit of a bio. I don't know if you have strong feelings about that, Stephen.
I like bios, but I also like things that stand out. This stands out. It's he's taking a strong perspective here. For us, what he's basically saying here is that the only thing that matters is his past work and what he's proposing. And with a simpler ask like this, where you're doing some editing and animation, it kind of makes sense. We don't need it as much as we might on another project, especially where there's a whole bunch of people involved and we want to know how you're weaving everything together. Ostensibly, these things could be done by a single individual. So
that's true. Yeah.
I'm fine with it. I always like a little bit more of a bio to kind of get a better sense of like who you are and what you're bringing to the table. But, this was a smart way of kind of going about it in a minimalist fashion.
Yeah. And I guess, what do you think from a client perspective? I know personally you do like, you're cool with this approach, but do you think clients would not have that connection if they didn't have a bio?
It's hard to say with certainty because hitting you right off the bat with "I'm Matt Crescenzo" means you're going to remember Matt Crescenzo better. You're not going to get bogged down in a paragraph or two of text. And again, because the creative ask here is a little bit simpler, I think that's smart.
Yeah.
I couldn't say either way and really make a strong case for why you'd want to include a lengthy bio.
Yeah. And now we get to the summary page. I personally appreciate a good summary. I think one nitpicky thing I have here is just the word creative is used a little bit too much. But otherwise, I do love a good summary page. And again, I think this is a really well-structured pitch.
I'm fine with it.
Yeah, so getting into the ask, we did talk a little bit about just kind of, restating the brief sometimes, to make sure that, hey, like I understand what you're asking for. I understand this format. So it seems like this is just kind of a quick log line of, hey, I understand this. So he said here to create a compelling 30-second highlight video campaign around real customer success stories and results to drive new consultation bookings. Pretty straightforward to me. I don't know if you have any other thoughts on this.
No.
Stephen.
one logistical thing to think about when you're like restating the ask, and why I'm not a huge fan of that, is like, if someone's seeing, hearing, reading, dozens of pitches, then, they're incentivized to skip over things that are obvious. And
Yeah.
unless you're grossly misstating the ask or interpreting in a really novel way, that's one of those things that people are going to skip over, because it's the same beat in like 30 pitches over and over and over again. So, meh. So that becomes a logistical thing.
Yeah, I always think it's kind of an art form to like really put into words what this video is going to be with, if you don't have the opportunity to do a proof of concept. Some people do use their pitch video submissions as an opportunity to upload proof of concept. But I felt like his synopsis is very clear. Like, I have a very clear image of what this video is going to be, and he does it in a very chronological way. He says this video will be a fun, snappy snapshot of core benefits. It will start by, having a quick animation of the brand logo, simple line of copy. And then, goes into the next 15 to 20 seconds of this video will be, the testimonials, the success stories, and then the CTA. So I do think this is a pretty clear and crisp description of what the video is going to be, without any visuals or, proof of concepting.
Agreed.
Yeah. And I think this slide is very interesting to me too, partly because you're getting into storyboarding a little bit here, but I think it's a with short form content, anything that's between 6 seconds to 30 seconds, or usually 6 to 15 seconds for social, there's a great opportunity for you to really just like lay out exactly what you're going to do, almost frame by frame, and really describe it, because every second counts in this format. Every second has to be sort of leading people towards the end goal. So I think it's smart to include some slides of what the opening shots are going to look like, and then kind of breaking that down into, here's what the next 15 to 20 seconds are going to look like. It really, even though you don't have to edit something to show that, you can just put together a couple of quick frames. And I think this is a really smart way to do that.
Yeah, I do wish it was something that people understood more often. And again, it depends on the pitch and the project. But like, one concern that we have oftentimes, people who haven't done a lot of a particular type of content, is, can they execute their story or tell their message in X amount of time? And, one of the most common issues we run into when someone's doing, when someone who's done a lot of short films and commercials, short films and like music videos, is coming out to do like a commercial project for the first time, is they have a harder time telling that in 30 seconds. And all of a sudden they have like a 3-page script, and we're like, how's this going to work out? Right. And so I think it's really nice to break down second by second what's going to be what, even if it's just like first 5 seconds, second 5 seconds, middle 10 seconds. That can be really effective and help you as well as you think about things going into it later on. Junbei, to your question, I think we're talking about the bio again. Junbei asks, should you include a bio in every pitch? I think what I was kind of saying before is like, a bio is nice at the end of the pitch. I don't think it's hypercritical. And again, I just kind of say that like, it's nice if what you're including is entertaining or hyper relevant to the creative ask.
I would say, especially with travel or projects where you need to be in a certain location, the bio will come in handy, or showing that you have experience working in a certain location. My question here is, do you think this is enough of a hook? I know we talked a little bit about the structure of the brief, but just the creative itself. Do you think just putting a line of copy and the brand, I do love that's very brand forward in that sense, but what do you think about just that first 5 seconds of creating a hook?
It's a synopsis, so I'd keep going through the pitch treatment to figure that out. since ultimately this is a marketing agency, I think it's going to be a little bit more challenging when it comes to hooks. But let's keep going.
Yeah. Cool. So yeah, he does go ahead and break it down all the way to the call to action. And then a big thing in the brief and executional mandatories, as we saw, was they really wanted to incorporate the brand colors. I think this is a great way to show that, how you're kind of breaking it into different slides and different frames. And then here we have, it looks like just some of the real footage
Oh wait, Maddie, are you scrolling through? We're still only seeing the creative synopsis.
Oh.
We're moving a bit.
Oh, I think maybe there's an internet delay. Sorry.
Oh.
Can you see the creative treatment now?
I can, yes. But there was a storyboardish section. Can we go back to that?
Oh yeah, this is the brand colors.
Cool. Brand colors is nice. Wait, is it earlier up in the pitch that he has the like storyboard section?
Wait, sorry, you can only see the cover of the treatment?
Right now we're on the creative treatment page.
Okay, good. That's where I am. Sorry. It's my internet's a little slow today. So yeah, this is just I think just screenshots of the testimonials. And then here's just kind of, I think, everything put together as one flow. And that's it. It's pretty minimalist. Yeah, I think it's a very well-structured.
Wait, go back to the flow.
I'm there.
Okay. This is the area. Yeah, Marissa mentions Marissa, who's the magical genie voice off camera.
Wizard of Oz.
That there's a little bit of lag as you move from page to page. So this is the area where I spent more time, and I think that Ad Quadrant spent more time, because essentially what we're seeing here is some sort of like storyboarding for what this video is going to look like, right? We already kind of broke out the first 5 seconds is going to be the logo and some hooky text, and then we're going to get into the the sort of customer stories, the testimonials, and then we're going to end on this like little call to action here. And so this kind of breaks it down, but I felt wanting for more, because it's basically as I take a look at this, it's kind of like a logo and some introductory text against a flat color background, and then some miscellaneous footage, a freeze frame on maybe an interesting infographic, and then we cut back at the end to like a solid color background and text. And so I wasn't totally sure how most of the video was going to feel, and I kind of felt like just using the flat color background. Marissa says she still only sees the creative treatment page. Oh, technology, internet.
Yeah, no, sorry about that. You're seeing the creative flow page, right, Stephen?
I am.
Okay, cool. I agree with you. It is interesting to bookend the creative with the logo and the logo on the end. I think for me, I just want to see the logo once, honestly. But yeah, it does. I do feel like you can probably use that time up front a little bit better by really just kind of maybe having some kind of movement, some kind of interesting text that's going to just really draw you in, or an image or a soundbite from one of the testimonials. So I think the only weak point I see here is that first 5 seconds.
Well, I mean, having the benefit of having seen the final video, the first 5 seconds here aren't tremendously different. But what I was sort of building towards was like, it really feels like we're going to have some testimonial, nice testimonial tidbits in the middle, but testimonials don't usually bring a lot of substance necessarily. And if you're in direct response, you really want to have that messaging carry a lot of substance. Like, this is the service that we're going to provide you specifically, right?
Yeah.
with the ad quadrant up front against the solid color background, we're not necessarily establishing a tremendous amount of branding because the color's in isolation. And bringing isolated colors from a brand's palette can work to some degree, but ultimately the branding kind of has to incorporate everything. Bring in a bunch of the brand colors at once so it ties it all to the brand, because most people otherwise aren't going to pick up on it if those colors are in isolation. It can work in more of an umbrella brand play where you're just trying to sort of pepper the story or the video with different colors that tie back to the brand. But especially because ad quadrant has a whole bunch of different colors, I'm not getting a strong connection to ad quadrant.
That is challenging that they had so many colors on their palette.
Yeah. And so you want to be a little bit tighter, and you want a little bit more consistency throughout it. But then also opening with just text over a solid color background isn't super engaging, right? And this is obviously a note that we could have given, to the filmmaker as well if ad quadrant ultimately responded most strongly to this. But then outside of the sort of like testimonial, middle section here, I wanted a better sense of like, how is the messaging going to come in, right? Are we going to cut to more solid color cards with some messaging? Are we gonna, as it seems to suggest, like freeze frame on people for a moment and have some messaging? It was hard to tell, and because the messaging in a true view for action is so critical, that was the area where I feel like ad quadrant ultimately had some hesitations about this pitch, because the past work was cool. The editing style is cool. The overall presentation of this pitch is really cool, but I think that they were looking for more substance in direct messaging. Oh, Maddie froze. Oh no, Maddie froze. And
now for our next question, which usually takes about 2 seconds to answer. Do you feel like this is feasible from a production standpoint? This is your area of expertise.
Totally.
Thumbs up. Yes, definitely. Great pitch. I love the minimalism. I love that there's no fluff in this. Now we're going to move into our podcast pitch, which I'm very excited about. We have never, ever reviewed a podcast pitch before on Pitch Feedback Live. So this is from Anjali and Mackenzie for the Next Great Podcast project. The ask is very open in this brief. It could be a podcast of any genre. You don't have to be a seasoned podcaster. You could just be someone with an Amazon microphone in their basement. Like, I love how open this brief is. Like, we got so many submissions. We got almost 1,800 submissions. And we just saw so many great ideas, and people just come out for this, and many of them were kind of, this is something they had in the back of their head for years and they wanted to execute. So with that, there's not really a lot of executional mandatories to take a look at, but we will take a quick look at what was expected in the pitch process, because I think that is an important detail to go over here, especially as we review the pitch from Anjali and from Mackenzie. So the requirements here: a short synopsis that describes the idea, the treatment that outlines your series. There were a lot of questions that we got over at Info at Tongal about, like, how do I do a treatment for a podcast? Because it's not a visual medium, and people associate, I think, treatment with visualization. Links to past work, and also you had the option. This is very, very key here. You had the option of doing a 1-minute audio trailer for your podcast, a casting board, some notes on your host, and a pitch video. So you had all these great kind of optional submission fields to really help communicate, and give a taste of what your podcast would sound like and what it would feel like. So I think we can kind of move on from that. There's not much more to this brief. It is a very open ask. So I think we can go ahead and just take a quick look at Anjali and Mackenzie's pitch video, which they did over Zoom, and I think it's really well done. So I'll go ahead and I'm going to play a short piece of it, knowing that we are having some technical issues with the streaming on the video.
Marissa, is it working?
For book 23, from New Jersey, and we both studied journalism and media studies at Rutgers University. And since graduating in 2018, we've both been working full-time in the media production industry.
So one thing I will say about this pitch video is that they don't actually go into their idea that much. They introduce themselves. They are the host. This is their idea. They're going to be talking about real life issues, things that they've gone through. They do describe it as somewhat like fictionalized version of themselves, which I think is sort of interesting. But the pitch video is very professional. It is very much these are best friends who have great stories to tell. But I didn't get that sense in the pitch video. There's a few more seconds on it. I don't think we need to watch the full thing, but it is kind of one of my, I think, was something that kind of came up for me when I was watching it. It's a lovely pitch video, but it was a great opportunity to kind of get a sense of what that banter would be like between them. And it's a very short pitch video. You can, we usually recommend about like 2 minutes or less. This was just under a minute. So I felt like there was probably some more time to kind of get into what the podcast would sound like.
So this, without having to watch it necessarily, the pitch video is really straightforward. They're soft spoken, they're direct. They seem really cool, especially as I dig into their treatment and checked out some of their past work. I dig them. But it reminded me that when you're putting together a pitch video for a project, whether it's a podcast or whether it's a video project, you don't need to overthink this necessarily, but you kind of want to think about like the tone of your pitch video and the tone of the video you're presenting, right? Because whether or not the client is thinking about it on a one-to-one basis like that, if you're pitching something that's like quirky and fun and different and comedic and really unique, but your pitch video is direct and more straightforward, and you dial back on some of that personality and quirk, then it makes me wonder, where is that, and will it come through in what you're pitching, right? Mm-hmm. The same as if you're coming in and you're pitching on, a dramatic, emotional, sentimental, anthem spot, and you came in and you were quirky and fun, and you're like, hey, I'm a great guy. I do cool videos like this all the time. Then I'd be like, but do you get it? Right? They kind of have to cohere and match up. And what I noticed immediately in looking at the treatment in the past work and then comparing that with the pitch video here is that not enough of the personality came through, because they both seem really, really cool.
And hilarious. I mean, some of their videos are very funny.
Yes.
Yeah, I know. I thought their pitch video was so great. It's, and I think there is that instinct to be like, well, I'm in front of the client. I should, put my best blazer on and just be super professional. But I think it's totally okay to be a little quirky and to show that side of yourself, especially if that's what you're pitching. So yeah.
And look, the pitching is really difficult. Again, kind of making a broad note here, and I don't know if it makes sense for us to play more past work. Past work is. Video playing is a little iffy right now.
It's a little janky.
But this was a challenge that I faced all the time when I used to represent writers. Unfortunately, a lot of the success that people have is because they're really good pitching, right? And sometimes some of the people who do the best creative work aren't necessarily the best in a room or on camera and pitching. So it's a challenge, right? But it is a skill that you need to develop. And when I'm looking at a pitch video from a filmmaker or from a storyteller of any kind, whether or not the expectation is fair and whether or not the expectation reflects how good the final product could be, I kind of expect that pitch video to reflect some of the storytelling ability, the directorial ability of the filmmaker, right? Like if you're a good storyteller, then you should be able to tell me a good story about how you're going to make my project come to life. And so that's where you kind of see how like the tone of your pitch video should sort of match what you're pitching. And that was sort of my hesitation here ultimately.
Yeah, I agree. I think just going through the pitch itself, I don't know if we actually have said the name of the podcast, but it's Watch Me Do My Best. It's fairly autobiographical, but with some fictional elements. So we'll get into this, but yeah, I think it should feel cohesive, as you said, like it's part of one universe. So here we start with their story synopsis, and I love that they use the Tongal pitch as template for their podcast pitch. And just talking about themselves as friends, navigating adulthood. They're both pretty recent graduates from Rutgers University. And, they share similar goals in life. It seems like they both have an interest in media and, and reaching certain goals. So yeah, I think they really establish themselves pretty well here. I love this goofy picture of them. I think this picture really does set the tone more than the pitch video itself. But right, so pretty simple story synopsis here.
Okay, so here's the challenge with something like this, and for a lot of people who do, any sort of narrative content, slice of life stories, which is sort of what this is, right? We're going to meet these fictionalized versions of these two people and kind of spend time with them as they experience life, right? Mm-hmm. What's really challenging about that, because it's quite common, whether it's like a TV show pitch or a movie or a book, a podcast, is that you need to show exceptional execution or a really unique point of view and tone for that to stand out and succeed. And so, and especially with this podcast project, having looked at, I haven't read any pitches I looked at for this one, certainly not as many as other people, but like I saw so many pitches where people were like, I'm interesting and I'm just going to talk about my life. Some people were actually pretty interesting. I think both of these girls are pretty cool. And I think, but I don't think they made a strong enough case for how their point of view was going to come through, how it was going to stand out, and how that tone was going to be really different.
And also like how they would establish auditorily, I guess, the idea that they are defined space and time and talking to their past selves, giving advice to their past selves. So I think that's a super interesting concept, how you establish that. I think I would like to see that. Again, we haven't gone through the whole pitch, but that has kind of planted that seed. Okay, I want to see how do they actually establish that in a podcast environment.
Yeah, and this actually reminds me of the point I made at the top of this, where I see oftentimes pitches where people come in and they kind of take a general approach to pitching, and they kind of rely heavily on their past work. I know we can't really show it here, but some of these girls' past work is really good and really amusing and pretty clever. But that doesn't come through as strongly in the pitch. And again, whether it's a commercial, right, or it's a podcast, that's a problem I see very often, right? Your past work is good. You know how to execute, but you don't necessarily yet know how to, or you haven't in this particular case, come through with a strong POV, a strong idea that connects to that past work.
And I think tone is so important for this one. They did put together a mood board, which, usually associate with something that's more visual. I think maybe putting in some references of other podcasts just to hone in on their sensibilities, since we don't have a first episode, we don't have a pilot yet, just kind of knowing where are they drawing their sensibilities from. Because, it's one thing to put it, to write it out and say, hey, this is a comedic podcast. It's, we're going to share some embarrassing stories. I love that they say we are brazen, humble, focused, scattered, visionary, flatulent, inspired, and unmotivated. That's wonderful. But I would like to see some references of things that they've been listening to that they want to kind of not replicate necessarily, but just get inspiration from.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those areas where if you're talking about how your tone is going to be unique, your POV is going to be unique, your voice is going to be unique, it helps to include a very specific example that reflects that. They'll get to it in this pitch briefly, but I don't think it goes quite far enough.
Yeah. And so here they just kind of talk about their, what their production will require. It seems like this is their first podcast, I believe, because the samples to past work were all videos. So yeah, they just kind of give an outline of what they'll be using. I kind of, this is one of those slides for me, especially with filmmakers. It's like, what camera are you using? What's your equipment? I don't think the client necessarily really needs that, unless it's really, really important to the style, the visual style, or the in this case, the auditory style of your project.
Well, a problem here, I see this sometimes, not super frequently, but where someone mentions something and it begs a question. And I'm like, 2 microphones, but what kind of microphones, right? Because it's a podcast and the microphone is really clutch, right?
Right.
People talk about how I'm going to use a really unique, high definition, cool camera. And then I'm like, so what kind, now that you mention it, right? And so I think that'd be something to be conscious of. If you mention something really specific that you're going to utilize, you then kind of have to be specific, because now I'm going to be thinking about it and asking questions.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. There sometimes when you touch on something, it can lead to more questions than answers. And that's a very good note. And then this is like the through line of the show, to do a funny, interesting, a descriptive bio, or to just be, just to be more mysterious. So in this case, I think it's totally appropriate to show that. And I think this is one of the places in their pitch where they really show that personality, and it really shines through, and you could tell they have a really great rapport. And I think
this was cool. I want to hang out in New Zealand.
I want to hang out with both of them. Next time I'm in New Jersey, let's get some coffee.
Okay, don't go to New Jersey. I'm from New Jersey. I don't want to go back, but I'll go to New Zealand.
I'll go to New Zealand. But I think let's talk about some of those other submission fields we had that I think were a little neglected here. You had the option to send in an audio sample. You had the option, to do a little bit more of an outline. I would have liked to have seen that. Well, we have a little bit more to go through here, but yeah, I just think that tone is so important.
Yeah, as we get into the script here, that's where I was like, an audio sample would have been so clutch.
Mm-hmm.
So this is some of the past work. We can skip over this because we're not really going to show it, but these were basically sort of really clever, funny little short videos.
And so this is the present, the future of themselves. Again, I still want to know, how is that going to be executed as a podcast? How are you going to tell the difference between the two? Okay, so here we go. We have our episode outline, which I love. So yeah, just they're pretty short descriptions, and it does seem to kind of follow a kind of narrative all the way through, which is an interesting take for this type of podcast. To actually follow a story, and it's not necessarily episodic. It's almost like a limited series.
Yeah, so I think we're getting into the weeds a bit here, and this is hyper specific, but if you're introducing an element we're going to talk to ourselves from the future, and this is something I've seen occasionally in commercial work as well, right? Where someone who's used the product in the future is talking to their past self. It has to really do something unique. And the sort of she gets a call from her own number, and when she answers, it's herself in the future. I wasn't really sure what that was bringing, what the drama is, or what the perspective is, or what what are you like in the future. She kind of covers it a little bit in the character description, but it still didn't quite go far enough for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think there was a lot of maybe a little bit too much story for to execute on a podcast. There are a lot of descriptions here of I'm reorganizing my drawers. I'm in my apartment. I want to, again, I think an audio pilot or a sample would have been very helpful here to kind of see how would you bring that to life, for me, as almost like a sound play or something. But yeah, I agree. I because the whole crux of this podcast is sort of self-awareness, self-improvement, confidence, and kind of, overcoming these challenges. I want to know what are the lessons in each of these episodes? What am I learning? What am I taking away?
Yeah, I mean, here what I'm thinking, this is coming out of like the scripted TV background, is like, what's the story engine? What's the hook that's going to carry me through things? If you're ever doing anything that's multiple episodes, whether you're doing a short film series or a digital series, a podcast series, if you have a story that runs through everything, and I need to follow it, then you're basically saying I have to start with episode 1.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Episodic is great because then I can become a fan at episode 17. But if it's going to be a 10 episode series, then when I get to the end of episode 1, I have to have some reason to continue. If it's just kind of like slice of life the whole time, there's no hook drawing me forward. There's no story engine, so to speak, motivating the drama, the conflict in every episode. And that was a little bit of my worry here. If we knew what chaos or drama or conflict was created when you got a phone call from yourself in the future that like you might die in 13 days, then whoa, shit, that'd be nuts. And then crazy shenanigans can happen, up to the 30 days. But I know, it's kind of riffing right now. But
no, I think that's a very fair point. Like, what is going to be my reason to either binge listen to this or want that next episode. And then they give a sample script. Again, I think an audio version of this would have been great. Mood board, which I actually think is good here. And I think some actual podcast references would have been probably better placed in terms instead of a mood board. But I do appreciate all the personality that they put into their pitch. I think that was pretty effective.
Yeah, I didn't think the mood board was coherent enough for me to get a clear sense of what it was trying to say. But yeah, I mean, on the script thing, regardless of the quality level, because we're all locked down in different parts of the world, and so they may not have been able to get together to record in an ideal setting, their podcast. I think especially if you're saying that our tone, our voice, our point of view is really unique, being able to record an episode or a snippet of an episode so that I get a sense of what that means and how it comes through would have been clutch.
I want to know, like, what is that banter going to sound like? Is it going to make me laugh while I'm, driving to work or,
Yeah.
And with that, we'd also like to say thank you. Come again to the next episode of Pitch Feedback Live. This is our last one of the year. We try to do these every 3 months or so. So if you are if you are interested in getting any of your pitches reviewed by us, feel free to email them to us at info@tongal.com, and we will be happy to consider them. Thank you again, Stephen, for your time. Always a pleasure.